Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Sutherland, and I'm a parliamentary intern for the environment. I'm very excited to be introducing our next session, Beyond the Ballot, Maximizing Electoral Participation. If you were able to join us this morning, we heard from some incredible environmental leaders who represent Canadians in the House of Commons and the Senate. They've done amazing work, but I think it's important to remember that getting involved in environmental politics doesn't have to mean running for office. In this session, we'll be looking at other ways to get involved in the electoral process by speaking with community and environmental campaign experts. We'll be hearing about partisan and nonpartisan opportunities, including paid positions, and how they can help with skill building, career development, and amplifying climate action. For this session, we are lucky to have partnered with New Majority, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that's already very involved in this space. New Majority focuses on increasing turnout for Canada's largest group of voters, young people aged 18 to 34. Today, we're joined by their executive director, Amanda Mundy, who will be moderating this panel. On top of their work with New Majority to strengthen face-to-face ground organizing, Amanda founded The Workaround, a co-working and childcare center cited as one of the most innovative businesses in Toronto. Amanda is also the author of a best-selling book, Day 9, their postpartum depression memoir, and their work has been featured in the Globe and Mail, Fast Company, the Toronto Star, Forbes magazine, Bloomberg, CBC, and more. With that, Amanda, I'd like to give a big thank you for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda. It's nice to meet you. I know I was with virtual. I'm like, it's nice to meet you. I don't know who's out there, but I would love for you to dump into the chat where you are tuning in from, so we know who's in the audience today. That's always a great place to start. So pop in, tell me where you are from. If we have any Lana Del Rey fans all day today, you know that lyric, like, I've got my red dress on tonight. All day I've been singing that about this green shirt. Like, I've got this flip panel and I've got my green shirt on today. And I promise I won't sing anymore. I'm going to tell you about New Majority. So New Majority is a national get out the vote civic engagement organization that's really dedicated to activating young people to participate in democracy. And when I say young people, if there's anything I know, even though I'm probably out of the category of young person into elder millennial, it's that not everybody is the same. And there isn't one reason to vote, one singular why to mobilize someone to vote. For us, what our organization is so focused on are the unengaged people in the spectrum of there's definitely not going to vote, definitely going to vote. And then there's this huge section in the middle, a majority of young people in this country who don't know as an election is happening, haven't voted before, aren't sure how or where to vote. The process seems scary, can feel like we're not really sure how to participate, or polarization starts to get really intense and it starts to become a conversation of like, politics, that's not really for me. I'm going to stay out of it. And for us, it becomes a really big problem that we really worry about the state of democracy in this country and that young people's voices are heard. And so what we're really focused on as an organization since our founding in 2019 is get out the vote and mobilizing young people face to face. So that means walking people to the polls, calling up young people and saying, do you have a plan to vote? Getting people to make vote plans with their friends. We know that relational organizing, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit on this panel soon, is one of the most effective ways to help people to vote. And so really what we're looking at is how do we encourage and inspire unengaged young people to demystify civic participation in voting, but as we'll talk about today, beyond voting, into other civic engagement practices that can show people democracy is real. One of the things that I certainly feel, and we've heard it on the road, is when young people aren't heard, when they don't see themselves reflected in politics, when we see polarization and authoritarian looming, democracy doesn't really feel real. a little bit we feel like we're being gaslit, that there's this democracy, but all of these things that I believe in aren't reflecting in my policies. So is it real? So for us as an organization, it's really important that we make democracy feel real. And since I was given a few minutes to plug, I will plug that we are currently recruiting summer volunteers, youth volunteers across the country to make democracy feel real. So not just getting people out to vote in our 3 provincial elections that are happening in the fall in BC, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick, but also to lobby and to meet with elected officials, to show up at city council deputations, to write their elected officials and participate in democracy in a really real way. That was my really quick pitch. I promise I will do a lot less talking for the rest of this panel, but I take the space when I am given it. Now I'm going to introduce you to our really, I'm going to tell you that my notes here says esteemed panel. I'm going to go ahead and say kick-ass impressive panel because that's what I'm seeing here. And let me tell you a bit about who's on this call. So we're going to start with Nadine Nakagawa, who is a community organizer, creative writer, and city councillor in New Westminster. She works as an equity and inclusion strategist, co-owns a consulting business called Ablaze Services, and is the co-founder of the Feminist Campaign School. Love it. Clement Badra started his career working as a coordinator on green infrastructure projects. Clement got involved in federal politics as a parliamentary intern for the environment, as well as local community-based projects, and now works as the cabinet of the mayor of the most populated borough in the city of Montreal. Awesome. And Margareta Doval is a strategic communicator, public policy advocate, and holds extensive relationships in federal, municipal, and provincial politics. She is the managing director of the Resource Works Society, a Vancouver-based nonprofit, and leads the annual Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase. It's pretty kick-ass. So I'm really excited. I got a lot of questions. I'm really excited to ask all of you about your expertise. But if you want to dive deeply into the esteemed panel's background, you can explore their profiles on AirMeet. Additionally, this platform that we're using called AirMeet also has a resource tab where the panelists and organizations can share their valuable resources for our audience. And then towards the end of the session, we're going to open the floor up for Q&A. So save those questions. Make sure you're popping them into the Q&A section so that our tech amazing team that's in the back end here can read them to me. I will read them out to the group, and then we're going to continue to have engagement between the audience and our panel here today. Everybody ready to get started? Thank you so much for shouting out where you are. I love to hear all of that. And let's roll. We ready, panel? Thumbs up. All right, everybody's ready. Let's go. So we're going to start with a question to each one of you. So we'll make sure that everybody gets a chance to answer the first question, which is that when we're talking about youth involvement in elections, too often, the focus is very similar to my work, which is on voting. So I want to start by broadening that view around not just elections, but how do we expand and define the conversation of youth engagement? And Nadine, I'll start with you in the context of electoral participation, especially with an eye to climate-concerned youth. How do we broaden this beyond voting?
Well, my bio starts that I'm a community organizer, and that's because that's where my heart really is. And I think that sometimes we get very focused on election campaigns. And, we mobilize, especially at the provincial and federal level, we mobilize these massive, investments, like spend like $100,000 on a campaign, have a campaign office, have these crews of volunteers that go out. And then we drop people like a bad habit, like when the election's over. And so there's huge opportunities to mobilize around issues at any time in the election cycle. I also think there's a huge opportunity to hold politicians accountable after you help them get elected, which often we don't do enough, especially at the municipal level. Like I was endorsed by some environmental and climate organizations, and then they met with me afterwards to say, okay, so now do what you said you were going to do. Very few people do that. I would also say that there's a group that I really admire that's based in what's colonially known as Surrey, and they're called Climate Recentered, and they are basically focused on reconceptualizing the climate movement, which is often known to be very white, sort of upper middle class, And they're young racialized people living in Surrey, and they're actually organizing primarily around community care. So they do things like organize water during heat events. They've organized like basketball tournaments and gaming nights as a way to connect with community on things that actually matter a lot more in our day to day than climate. Like when it's hot, we really feel it. But the climate movement is less pressing for people than, let's say, the bus to their neighborhood, or is there a sidewalk so I can actually walk to my classes? So I think that there's opportunities to engage with people on lots of issues that are climate and environment related. Oh, my cat Moo is here, always here for the video, at any point, and build, like, there's a reference to relational organizing. Relational organizing has to be reciprocal, and it has to be based in genuine relationships. And I don't feel that electoral organizing really is based in real relationships. So that's a huge opportunity, is just to be a community organizer, to be engaged with people around you. And yeah, I mean, obviously, young people can also be candidates. They can also encourage other people to run. They can work on campaigns, all those things. But for me, community organizing is a long game. And it feels a lot better than electoral politics often does.
I love that. There's the conversation about relationships and activating people to mobilize and move on relationships, I think is something, well, I'm going to guess we're going to hear throughout this panel today. I also love that our conversation today is inclusive of pets. So welcome to your cat. What is your cat's name? Introduce your cat to the audience.
Her name is Moo, and she will be
Hi,
here.
Moo. Hi, Moo. Thank you for joining us. Margareta, I'd like to go to you. Talk to us a bit about your definition of broadening electoral participation.
Yeah, totally. I've worked in politics, as you mentioned, at all levels, municipal, provincial, federal. I've been a volunteer, I've been a staffer, and, a lot of the conversations that we have about politics are about ideas, because it's ultimately about giving whoever becomes the government the mandate to govern, to make decisions on behalf of all of us. And I think that's a really important filter, especially for young people who are just in the process of figuring out how to get involved, maybe trying to navigate how to intensify that involvement and have a stronger voice on the issues that you care about. And you do want to subject the candidates, the parties, the movements that you're part of to some scrutiny. Where is the likelihood of change going to be? Are the people that you're working with credible? Are they going to help you actually advance the kind of change you're passionate about? But I think the really important piece, and this is why I would really focus on the elections and things outside the electoral cycle, but within partisan politics component of this, is the people that you're surrounded by. The thing that's often going to make it or break it for you, beyond the issues, is going to be whether you like the people that you're working with. Are they engaging to be with? Are they fun? Are they loyal to you? Are they people that you are happy to not just count as your colleagues on campaigns, and people that you dedicate your resources and energies and time to electing, but are they people that you want to grab a coffee or a drink with, people that you enjoy spending time with? And there's a lot of focus that happens during campaigns on the lead into a specific election. We're seeing that, of course, provincially right here in BC right now. And that's a really good time to get involved. It's a good time to show up and to really signal to the people that you want to work with that you're there to back them, you're there to support them, and there to be a constructive voice. But there's a lot of value in getting involved outside of that hustle and bustle that leads into an election. That's often when the volunteer corps is the smallest on any campaign team. It's often where people who are really passionate and engaged can rise really quickly, especially if you're, like I said, willing to show up and be there. And one other thing I note as well is working in and around politics looks like a lot of different things. It can be actively making it your career. And I have a lot of friends who are political staffers, people who have been political staffers and moved into other work. And that can be a really meaningful and fulfilling way to really show yourself. Running for office, running for roles as a volunteer can be really meaningful. But then there's just cyclical volunteering. So you don't have to have politics be your career to find meaning and purpose in it. And I know a lot of people who have entirely different professional focuses. They're lawyers, they're engineers, they're builders in some cases, they're business owners, they do all kinds of work. And there's a role for everyone, irrespective of whether this is your full-time professional focus or something you just want to do because you want to give back and you're passionate about your community.
I love that. What I'm hearing is like participation is a spectrum. and we can have minimal engagement, extended engagement, and even thinking about the intersection of burnout and, with the hustle and bustle and the grind, as you mentioned, and that can also very quickly lead to burnout. And so different levels of participation at different times in the campaign can balance some of that. Great point. Clement, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on broadening this definition?
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Well, first of all, I agree with everything that's been said so far. Obviously, those are really good points. One thing that came to mind first when I heard that question is really just keeping it simple as well. Just any type of engagement is good engagement, and just talking to people around you about these issues also count and also matter. I think we underestimate how ill-informed people are in general about the climate issues. We kind of all tend to live in a bubble where we feel like everyone knows what the issue is about, what the challenges are, and how to get through those challenges as a society. And personally, for the last few years, I've been getting out of that bubble that I was living in for a few years, and I've realized that there's still a lot of education to be done. There's still a lot of raising awareness that needs to be done as well. And I think just talking to your family, to your coworkers, to your friends about these issues on a regular basis, it matters and it counts. It can push people to try to question what they thought before. There is a way to go about it, obviously, because this is a subject that can be a little bit sensitive. Some people get triggered when you talk about these issues. We all probably have that conversation around the table during the holidays sometimes where things don't go well, but I think those are important conversations to have. And sometimes it resonates with people more when it comes from someone that they know than when it comes from the media or when it comes from politicians. So there's a role in there that to be played on a day-to-day basis. But I want to raise a flag that you need to be aware that can be eventually draining as well. So if you're able to do that surrounded with a group of people that are actually here to support you and help you out, I think it's a good way to go about it. And being a group of people that can share the frustrations around these issues as well when you go try to do that education sensibilization about these issues. So it's kind of the thing that came to mind.
Love that. Yeah, there's a community share and self-care aspect of getting into difficult conversations can be draining. It doesn't always go as you planned. I think that's such an excellent point. And also on the relational side, I just saw some research that came out of Students Learn, Students Vote in the US that said students are knowledge brokers to their households and families. So we have a bi-directional relationship between young people and their family members when we talk about elections. It's really interesting. You bring it up. Margareta, I'm going to go to you next for our next question. I'd like to dive into some of the many roles within the electoral process that you encourage youth to get involved in or to consider. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about what a riding association is and does, and how you build relationships with riding associations, and how that can be important if you want to get involved in electoral politics.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe I'll just start by saying that a common misconception that a lot of people have, especially if you sorry, this is my dog Maggie. She's decided to be curious. It's a common thing
pet friendly session.
I'm glad to hear
Love
it. She's
it.
glad to hear it too.
Love it.
I started out in politics, getting involved with my campus clubs. I went to University of British Columbia. Initially I was like completely apolitical and just really, I had issues I was really passionate about on the global level. I cared about women's rights globally. I cared about human rights. I cared about environmental justice. There were things that were super, super important to me, like poverty alleviation. And I didn't see those things being discussed enough in a domestic context to really encourage me to get involved. And to my earlier point about the people, I'm really lucky that some doors opened, but those aren't difficult doors to walk through. And that's really the beauty and simplicity of our system. If you want to be involved in the political process, really all you have to do is show up. Every single campaign, every single political party is desperate for human capital. They want your help and they want your support. They want you to have those conversations at the dinner table, and they want you to knock on doors to speak to voters about their mission and what they're trying to do for the country or the province or the city. And as it relates to the local level, politics is, especially on the federal and provincial level, actually very inherently local. We elect representatives from that basis, using the first past the post system, those people then go on to become legislators at the federal or provincial level. So having a corpus, a writing association around candidates or incumbents who are serving currently as MPs or MLAs is a really important part of that process, and you can be involved at every step. Like I said, you need to have that connection with the national vision piece, but you can find your home in a larger political environment, and you can do it in a way where it doesn't matter if you're elected as a volunteer coordinator for something or a chair. Personally, I serve as the chair for Metro Vancouver on the Liberal Party of Canada's board in British Columbia. I've been a riding association chair. I've served in riding associations at different levels. Those roles can signal what's the scope of your activity and involvement, but they're actually at the end of the day not that important. It's that just presence, it's being there, it's being responsive, and it's coming with good ideas and good people from outside of everyone's kind of common network that can help with political campaigns. And the kinds of stuff you do, like I said, can be voter identification. You're knocking on doors, you're making phone calls, which if it sounds scary, can actually be very, very fun. Believe me, when you get into it, you can realize that it's a fun way to broaden your horizons. It's engaging the community and, staffing booths perhaps at local community functions. And sometimes it's fundraising and it's helping get the word out, and everyone can do that and have a role to play in that. So it's a really broad range of ways to get involved. And I encourage people to think locally. And if you don't, jive with the team in one place, check out another event, check out another party, check out someone else's campaign and see if that's one where you like the energy and you like the people and you're passionate about what they're advocating for.
Love that. Nadine, I'm going to go over to you next. I'd like to talk a bit about, you can tell participants about the kinds of roles that are out there if you want to get involved in a campaign. And maybe you can offer some advice to our participants about how to get started if they're thinking about seeking lead campaign roles.
I think it's really important to name that if this seems confusing and intimidating, it's meant to be so. Organizations, politicians gatekeep very intensively. And I just want to name that because when I've talked to young people who want to run for positions as a city councilor, for example, people will say yeah, but I don't know how to write a motion. And I'm like, neither do I. But we make it seem more complicated than it is to try and keep people out. It's just true. So, building off of that, I will say that I have felt that I've had to kick my way into things a little bit because it hasn't been as inclusive or as welcoming as I sort of expected it to, especially since I tried to volunteer my first campaign when I was 17, and people were if I met a 17-year-old who wanted to get involved in an election, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. That was not the reaction to me. So again, just know that it's not you, it's the system if it feels that way to you. I think, again, trying to just ask people what is available and showing up is important. I also think if you can ever avoid going places alone, that is always the best recommendation I have. Whether or not you want to delegate to a city council meeting, you want to go to a riding executive and see what that's all about. And I will also say that these things can feel very cliquey. Often these people have known each other for decades. They've worked together on multiple campaigns. If it seems like it's a party to which you didn't receive an invite, again, that's a real experience. So I say this because, again, I think this is a real turnoff for people trying to enter political spaces, is this exclusion. And that feels even more so. I am a racialized queer woman. And that even when you have aspects of your identity that are being tapped into that can feel even more powerful. So there's that. So your question was how to get involved. I think, show up, bring people with you, feel like you can ask questions, whether that's, emailing somebody ahead of time, dropping it on their social media profiles, whatnot, about how to get engaged. And I think also too, if you can bring any audacity with you, please do so. These organizations are very slow to change. They often, what I hear about campaign work is, well, we don't do that. We do it this way. And it's oh, cool. We do it the way that we did it in 1994. I love that. So, these organizations are very, very resistant to change. And so just knowing this going in, that there will be resistance to ideas that you bring, there may be resistance to you as a person, so that we don't feel, we try and like Clement said, try and have that protective shield against us, I think is really important. So I don't think I answered the question that you asked, but I just think those things are really important to name for young people getting involved.
Oh, I think you answered the question. I also think I'd like to start a T-shirt campaign that just says "Bringing the Audacity," because you're so right. Like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Right? Such a good point. I'm gonna go to Claymont next. I would like to draw on your own experience in elections and think about how these roles lead to meaningful skill development and career opportunities, especially in jobs where there's an intersection of climate and environmental priorities. So maybe if you could speak a bit to climate and jobs and your experience, how do we see that intersection play out?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting question. What comes to mind is, if I can tell you a little bit of a story for how I got to work with the mayor that I'm working for right now, is that back in 2019, I got involved in a campaign. I ran as a candidate and I participated in the debate. And for that debate, there was a organizing committee, and on that committee was sitting the future mayor of the borough. And so we got to know each other for the first time there. And when she got elected, she actually reached out to me, remembering the debate from back in 2019, because she knew I would be a good fit in the cabinet with the knowledge that I had, and that I would be complementing the rest of the team. And so basically, I got the job a few years ago because we met back in 2019 during a debate for which I was a volunteer. When you're a candidate, obviously you're a volunteer, and so I was volunteering for the party, doing a debate for the party, and that's how I first got to know her. And that's one of the ways that being engaged, being involved, can lead to opportunities. It was mentioned earlier that they in this world, they do crave for human capital. They also always look for young people that are engaged, informed, and are trying to make change. So when people are already in this world, meet up young people that seem to be interested in this world, there's a good chance that they're going to remember you. They're going to reach out at some point if they feel like there's an opportunity, or you can be proactive and reach out to them again. You won't ever get a no from someone that's involved in this world by saying, "Hey, I'm interested in getting involved. What can I do?" They're gonna find a place for you. Nadine brought some good points in terms of the challenges that you might face in getting involved. So you need to make sure that it's somewhere where you feel like it's a safe space that you can get involved into. But those are some of one example of how being proactive about getting involved in the election process on climate issues can lead to opportunities. I had never studied anything related to political science. I have a bachelor in biology and a master's degree. Took some governance courses, but very light. So I'm very far from my studies from what you would expect is needed in a cabinet for a mayor. What you really need to know is be informed about the issues, quick on your feet, and that's basically what they're looking for. I also think that some of the skills that you can gain getting involved in a campaign or getting involved as a volunteer in any type of political affiliated implication is people skills, human interaction skills. I think it's greatly underrated. A lot of people are very, very smart. They don't know how to handle people and how to talk to people, and that's something that's key. Being able to know how to take some comments from people, but also be able to explain things. And I think those are things that you learn on the fly, that you learn through experience, and that you learn by looking at how other people that you work with or volunteer with are doing it. So I think those are some of the transferable skills that you could get as well as like organizing skills, volunteer coordination skills that are always valuable and transferable in many fields. So that's kind of what can open up and opportunities that can show up when you try to be proactive and be involved.
I love that. I always say to our canvassers, you're now a business development, sales lead, marketing lead. You have all of these skill sets that transfer that's beyond just canvassing.
Absolutely.
Nadine, I'm curious on your opinion on this. What do you think in the intersection of climate and environment and jobs? How does this all intersect for you?
Yeah, I guess it's that the world unfortunately is based in a big way on networks and our ability to work on networks, and that's not great for a lot of people who feel excluded from that club. But I guess I see all these things as interconnected pieces of work. Like, as a city councilor, it's like climate is transit, is housing, is parks, is all these things. And so, yeah, work is very, very deeply interconnected in ways that we often don't anticipate. And some of the most helpful experiences for me have been ones that I went into expecting to get something totally different. Then it's like, oh my gosh, I learned that really weird lesson there, or I learned that weird skill there. I also just want to name something again. This is my hobby, is naming things, is that working on campaigns and electoral politics can be deeply ableist. And I just want to name that for people for whom things like door knocking might be like, oh, I don't have so-called people skills because maybe I'm neurodivergent. Or maybe I can't walk up. Like, I live in New West, which is on a hill. It's very physically demanding to canvass, to knock on doors in New Westminster. And people who might have mobility challenges or whatnot find it very difficult. So I just want to name that as well, that campaigns are deeply entrenched in ableism. And I think they need to evolve to incorporate more roles that are more inclusive and will offer more opportunities to reach more people. And then that creates more opportunities to learn new skills as well. And so when I set up like campaigns or recommend how we set up campaigns through Campaign School, it's also sort of that, like, what do you want to share, and also what do you want to learn? And I think that's a really beautiful way to think about campaigns, is that we can give and take something. A lot of people join political campaigns or political movements to meet people. They want to make community, and that's a really, really great takeaway. So I think being clear with yourself that you're allowed to ask things of movements that you're part of. Like, I would love to be part of this. I want to have opportunities to learn, to share, to grow. And the clearer we are about that, the better we're able to communicate that to people, so we can find that place that works for us, so that we don't end up getting assigned to canvassing if that is something that does not work for us for many, many reasons. Agreeing that, like, it's not as bad as it sounds for some folks, but also, yeah, does not work for everyone. So yeah, being really clear about what it might be that you want to gain, and thinking about those transferable skills or those transferable networks are also helpful too.
I love that, and really appreciate your point on accessibility. It's so often we think about reaching people, and we have to consider how we reach people in all sides, the most inclusive and broad definition of how. It's so true. Clément, I want to go back over to you for a moment to talk about those who may not have voting rights. So thinking about international students, permanent residents, youth under 18, what are some meaningful ways that they can still engage in the electoral process to promote climate action?
Yeah, I think, to me, one of the best ways to get involved when you're in this situation is probably through your school, your university, or the institutions you're already involved with. I think there's a bunch of reasons why. First of all, well, you don't have the restrictions that you might have in other spaces. When you have the permanent residency, those kind of things, you don't have access to everything. One of the things also that's really important in those spaces is that you most likely already have some kind of network, some kind of support network that you know you can count on. You have your friends, you have your teachers, you have student organizations that are already doing things. And another reason why I think it's great to get involved in these spaces is also because you're directly talking to youth. Let's say if you're organizing a debate through your student organizations, most likely the people that are going to attend that debate are young people as well. So I think that's one way that you could really kind of get involved in a positive way without any restrictions. The more out of the box idea, some of you might have a bunch of followers on social media. I think that it's a good way to do it as well. Like I mentioned earlier, you need to get information out, and it's one of the most common ways nowadays that people get the information. Not just younger people, like everyone now is getting the information through social media, and we know the challenges that it brings for different reasons. But if you're creative, interesting, and dynamic around those ideas. That's one way that you can get involved and push the climate agenda. Getting involved with climate environmental organizations is also a good way to do it. It's probably slightly safer space than partisan campaigns. When you campaign for an environmental organization, there's less pressure on performance compared to what you can find in a partisan campaign. And one way, Nadine mentioned the idea of having community, getting involved to kind of create a community around an issue, is that when you see, when you find a local environmental issue in your riding that you live in, or in the area that you go to frequently, is mobilizing people around that issue. Getting people to know that this issue exists and that you need to do something about it. And you can create a group and feel supported with people that are from the same community, share the same values, know the same area, and so it's usually way easier to get people to be mobilized about something that's close to them than just global climate change in general, which feels, although we see the effect of it, it feels unreal and not palpable. And when you talk about something that's a lot more local, you're going to have people that are going to be mobilizing. I can tell you, working at the municipal level, that we hear people talk a lot more about very, very specific things than just in general what we're doing to reduce our CO2 emissions in our municipal buildings, for example. Nobody asks us that question. They're going to ask you what you're doing for the compost, what you're doing for urban agriculture, those kind of things that they can see that are closer to them. And so I think finding one or two issues and create a group, then you can put pressures on your elected officials and also create a momentum around that and have people get involved around environmental issues in general. And you can stretch it to other challenges that you want to talk about.
Perfect segue into my conversation of partisanship versus nonpartisanship, which is where we're going to move next. As issues in climate is, I'll fight all day on climate as a nonpartisan issue, but we certainly know that it can come up. So Margareta, I'm going to go to you next. And so if you can kick off, while all of you have done partisan work, and I'm hoping, at least you've all no doubt seen successful nonpartisan environmental campaigns and initiatives that have effectively mobilized young people to participate in their electoral process. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about some of the ways that those participants that can participate in nonpartisan activations or campaign on climate during elections, and maybe talk a bit about how that connects to skills development and job experience as well from a nonpartisan lens.
Sure. Well, I mean, I will admit that I will give you a little defense on the partisan thing again, but I think there is a lot to be said for good nonpartisan campaigns. When you're in an elections campaign, the public discourse and what people are talking about and thinking about is going to be framed by what parties are doing. And if you see a total gap in alignment between what you believe and what's important to you and the parties that either out there in the national space or are available for you to get involved with locally, then obviously that's not a good fit for you. But, I wouldn't dismiss it right off the bat. A lot of people that I know in politics who, like me, have often started with very little in terms of involvement and participation. My family came to Canada just before I was born from Eastern Europe. I grew up below the poverty line. I didn't really think politics was for me, but I was pleasantly surprised to learn that, if you just have a lot to give and a lot of interest and engagement in the issues, there are ways to get involved. And many of the people that I speak to from that background, people who have a different type of relationship to that work, they have issues and concerns. There's always some gap. There's always some aspect of, well, I like the party's policies on this, but I'm not so keen on this one. So it's finding the stuff that's actually important to you and focusing on that. And if you're still not finding that fit, you're not getting engaged by the people that you're meeting and that are hopefully welcoming you in and opening the door and encouraging you to apply your skills in a meaningful way, you can look for local nonprofits and organizations who are actively involved. And I work in the public policy space. I see a lot of great nonprofits, particularly ones based in Western Canada, put out elections platforms platforms of their own. They do town halls, they do all types of events that are trying to leverage the momentum that is around an electoral campaign, inviting candidates. Whether or not those actually are super effective depends a lot. I think if you're, really off center on an issue, it can be hard to get the candidates and the mainstream political parties engaged in what you're trying to bring to the table. But sometimes if you can get that right balance and you're supporting a group that is credible, that is persuasive, that is thinking a lot about its theory of change and how it's having that impact, you won't just be a part of instigating change, but you'll also benefit a lot on your career development side. And I've said versions of this before, but it's a subject matter that allows you to enter a space, but it's the occupations and the people that you meet that will actually allow you to grow. And you may think, oh, I want to be a writer or a policy analyst or a politician, or I want to, practice something in communications. But you may realize doing that work, and some of that you can do on campaigns and at nonprofits that are really active in the electoral cycle, that actually, no, you like something else entirely. So just try a lot of stuff. Like they say in university, take a bunch of entry-level courses. If you're thinking of getting politically involved, take a lot of entry-level courses by trying out different tasks on campaigns and around campaigns, if you think that's a little bit better for you, and see what really allows for you to feel like your heart's singing, you're committed to it, you're engaged, you feel meaningfully rewarded by the work you're doing. And that, if you're really invested and you're doing a good job, it will open doors for professional paid opportunities. And a lot of people who succeed on campaigns will get offered opportunities to come to Ottawa, come to Victoria, come to, wherever your local representatives end up going to make decisions for Canadians. So I would encourage people just to try a lot of stuff and see what you like. And don't be shy. Always ask questions. People are always happy to help, because everyone was new to a party or a campaign at one time or another.
Love that. And I can add my plug for nonpartisanship. And if you're going into a corporate environment, often it's the opposite of political. And so working in nonpartisan campaigns can be, again, trying something out to see if that's the world that even feels good for you. You're right. Because if that feels like that's not with my identity to be sort of anti-political, maybe the corporate world isn't for you. And this could be a great way to teach that. Nadine, I'd like to toss it to you. What's your thoughts on this partisanship angle and nonpartisanship and in some successful campaigns, how people can get involved?
Yeah, overall, it's not a binary. You can do both. As somebody who sits at a table, I still do community organizing. And so I don't like it when we position it as an either or. And sometimes like activist spaces do as well, that it's like you're either, with us or against us kind of thing. I think it's an effective way to do both, and both have different tactics that you can learn. I guess what I would say is that sometimes people involved in electoral politics put electoral politics above all other things, because those people do have the power to make decisions. It makes sense. Like, why advocate against somebody that you don't know or you don't like at the other side of the table when you could have somebody that actually who is open to your beliefs? So it makes good sense. I guess I would say that I really like, I want to put something about nonpartisanship. So as somebody who runs a campaign school, and feminist doesn't mean for women, it means for anybody who's underrepresented in any part of their identity. So it could be for somebody who's disabled, who's never seen somebody disabled at the table. We've had racialized Indigenous candidates come through our campaign school. But what we really put forward first and foremost is values. Values. So being really explicit and clear with your values. And that includes how you want to work internally. So political campaigns, issue-based campaigns, can be extremely extractive and harmful, because we say we're fighting for, we want to raise the disability rate and the income assistance rate because people are living in poverty, but also you should volunteer more for free. And that's really like kind of oppositional to what you're fighting for. So I think that the way we behave on any of our campaigns needs to represent the world that we want to build in terms of our issue and policy. So it needs to be rooted in deep, explicit shared values. You can get into, the difference between like a united front versus a popular front. You can Google that if you're interested in those ideas, how much your values overlap. But also, I really want to say that, like, again, values is explicit, because as a campaign school with the word feminist in it, we do not advocate that you vote for every woman. We are partisan in the way that we advocate for parties or candidates who support our values. So I do not support women who rip down other women or who rip down policies that support women. Let's be clear about that. So Is that partisan? Some people think it is. Some people will say, well, that is being partisan because, like, I'll just say it. I would never support Pierre Poilievre. No, thank you. Please no, that will harm me and my community if we elect a Pierre Poilievre government. Let's just say it. So is that partisan? Kind of, but also it's rooted in a value of lots of different work that I care about. So I think partisan often gets sort of like brushed across a lot of things when we're talking about and naming people who do and do not support different policies. Like, we have to be real about what people are going to do in those positions and how that will harm us. And then for our nonpartisan work, our community-based work, again, some people are like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and vice versa. I also don't believe in lifting up people who will harm my community or other marginalized communities. And so being really clear about that we can also say, no, I don't want to work with that person, even though on paper we both support X. So yeah, I guess the answer to all this thing about partisan, nonpartisan, and it's not, and I think like Marguerite is right, like I am a partisan person. I'm a member of a party. I've worked on partisan political campaigns for a really long time. I don't support everything that party does. It makes me cry sometimes. So, but so values doesn't mean you agree with everything, but values is about, for me, like an internal orientation about who we work with, how we work on things, and what we want to work on.
Love that. Love that. I'm going to toss it back to you, Nadine, for our second last question before I run to a rapid fire, which connects to your answer, which is why I want to go again to you or continue with you around inclusivity. And so when we're thinking about this in terms of youth from diverse backgrounds, including those who are traditionally underrepresented in environmental activism and politics, and how they're encouraged and supported to participate in electoral processes. So maybe you can give us quickly some ideas or avenues for how we address the educational accessibility and the systemic barriers that we know youth are facing.
Around campaigns, or can you just clarify that?
Yeah, I mean, like around, I would say outside of electoral campaigns, because we're talking about broadening outside the ballot here. So, I mean, this is a big question. I know, like, tell us how to solve systemic barriers. It's a huge question. So I don't expect you to have all the answers, but more so, are there some examples of ways we can bring more people in to working in civic engagement or in climate activism that isn't necessarily electoral politics?
Yeah, so I'll go back to this example of Climate Recentered because I love them. We often go around telling people what should matter to them. And the fact is that doesn't matter to them if it doesn't matter to them. It's not that, again, young people who have been disenfranchised and unincluded don't care about climate. They absolutely do. And also they care a lot about getting food today. So I think we need a lot of humility around our movements, and often the language is meeting people where they're at. I think that can come across as a bit condescending. I think it is like deep listening to people and allowing them to have ownership over movements. And so sometimes that is like skilling up people, like saying like, hey, let's like think about theory of change together. Like, what would be the theory of change on those activities? But I think allowing people to have ownership over what matters to them, maybe trying to provide a connection point about, food justice and climate and, well, let's just say capitalism, about how all these things connect to each other. But again, I actually don't think that it's a lack of information or knowledge. I think it is people are slightly beaten down by systems. And so if we can actually like have some level of repair to taking care of each other, listening to each other, making each other feel really celebrated and really good. That sounds so like silly and trite when I say it out loud, but I do actually think that is the mechanism. Is it's not meeting people where they're at to give them, again, that's a self-serving piece. I think it is hearing what people want to tell us, celebrating them for where they're at, what they're doing. They are already leaders in their community. They are already doing change making. And it's that sort of principle of fractals that sometimes taking care of your elders is actually change making on a larger sphere, but it's sort of daylighting that, naming that for people. So yeah, that's my answer.
Great. That's great. Thank you. I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question, drop it in the Q&A. We're just about to go to the Q&A and I'll start picking out some questions. But before I do, I'd like to hear from Clément on this question around accessibility and broadening the tent. What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's a subject that I find that touches me directly because I'm a quadriplegic, so I'm in a wheelchair, and I can say that there are not many disabled person in the environmental world in general, and things are moving in the right direction. But from my experience, as much as we put forward the fact that we're trying to be inclusive, we're trying to be creating spaces for everyone. Pretty much every environmental organizations I got involved with, or even the Green Party, when I got involved with the Green Party, any event that they were doing was in a space that wasn't accessible. I'm lucky enough that I don't mind getting carried, so I got carried up the stairs a bunch of times. I mean, most of the times. But the fact of the matter is, when you're in a situation that people haven't seen, you're most likely going to have to break down some barriers. And the reality is that you don't exist in the space you don't occupy. And because there wasn't, like, when you're in a wheelchair, you've got a bunch of issues that you want to deal with, and you don't necessarily have the time to think about these issues. I'm pretty privileged in certain ways, so that my focus wants off some of the issues that are not directly related to my disability. So I kind of was able to get involved in the environmental space. But if I could give an advice to people that are in a situation where they feel like they're a bit out of the norm, is that you're very likely to find people already involved in the space that can help you navigate the world. Find yourself a mentor, and just like Nadine mentioned earlier in the talk, is that when she sees someone that's a young person looking to get involved, they're super excited about it and they're looking to help them out. And if I consider, for example, the mayor I work with, she's an immigrant from Congo, and so she understands what it's like to face the challenges of coming from another country and trying to make yourself, to build yourself on your own. And so when she sees younger people in a similar situation, she's always willing to help out and always willing to give advice, or even use her network to be able to give them opportunities as well. And so, because it can be challenging, because you're probably going to have to break down some barriers at some point, being able to find yourself a mentor that's going to be willing to help is going to be very, very helpful. And very important to note that you don't underestimate how willing they are to give a hand to people that are looking to work in the same direction as they are. So that's pretty much what I had to say.
Excellent feedback. Thank you for that. I have more questions, and as any panel goes, we are out of time. So we're going to move to questions so that we can respect the participation of all of our amazing audience here who have asked a whole bunch of questions. And so I'm going to jump right into Q&A, and then I hope to close this all up with a rapid fire at the end. So stick around for that. So first question, I'm going to hang that over to Margareta. How do you communicate across partisan or ideological divides? And that question is from Mike in Winnipeg.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for the question. I think it's a really good one. I think the greatest change generally that you can find anywhere in the world of public policy, anything around public issues, local community, is finding points of commonality. So if you're trying to speak to someone who has a fundamentally different outlook to you, starting the conversation from a point of respect and listening and just trying to understand, you can always set boundaries and say, these are the things I don't want to debate. I don't want to have a conversation with someone who doesn't believe in the value of human rights or accessibility or diversity. And that's your choice, and you can and always should do that. But there's going to be a lot of gray between complete non-negotiables and, hey, we're in complete alignment. And whether you're talking to a person at the doorstep, you're trying to persuade them, give them some information about your candidate that maybe, historically wouldn't have supported that party, but you're wanting to encourage them to see the value of that candidate as a local representative, or you're having a conversation with a colleague or a classmate and you're just sussing out some stuff, or you're working with a large organization and you're trying to advance change within it. It's always good to focus on the things that are shared and really just ask yourself structurally, what are sort of the areas where there's difference and where there is overlap, and really lean into that overlap. Try to build bridges and acknowledge people's concerns, because I think fundamentally they come from a genuine place. And if we're meeting people where they are and we're genuinely curious about the perspectives that they bring, through that curiosity, through asking questions, you have an ability to persuade them and change their mind and find alignment between you and them to do work that is more meaningful than all of us just doing it in isolation. And that's the collaborative listening curiosity piece that I think is really key for anyone who wants to communicate with all Canadians, not just people who look and sound and think like you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. Next question is from Nikosi. As an international student, there's fear mongering in the experience, and the experience is an overall regression of Canadian multiculturalism that is getting in the way of community involvement. So I'm going to toss it over to Nadine to answer. What advice can you share for a healthy bridge of that divide?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm really scared about the rhetoric around housing in BC anyways, and what people are saying about what's causing the housing crisis here. Terrifying. I guess I just want to contest the concept that we need to bridge a divide. So even the concept of polarization, I've been rethinking lately that we think about polarization as two poles, but really that used to be an up-down pole in which some people had power and other people did not. And it was just made invisible then because we were irrelevant to the conversation and had no power to say so. So I guess the point is like, I think about, for example, who are we talking to? Being really clear about that, thinking about, for example, like spectrum of allies. Again, you can look these concepts up, spectrum of allies. Are you trying to move somebody who completely opposes you to being an ally? I wouldn't recommend that as a tactic. Are you trying to move somebody who might be like ambivalent about climate into action? Being really clear about where you're trying to move them along the spectrum of allies is helpful for how we talk to people. If I'm talking to somebody who's very opposed to me, again, it might just be trying to say, I'm not that scary. You know, I'm like 15-minute cities aren't towers with guns on them. So it might be, again, but I think the audience, when we talk about like a big audience, it's just not helpful to thinking about messaging. So being really clear about who you're talking to will help you sort of like what Margaret said, if like found like similar values or like how do you message them?
Love that. You're so right. There's no one size fits all. Last question. I will pull up on the screen and send that to Clement, which is, what are the challenges in electoral participation? Is it the first past the post system is the reason for the decline in electoral participation and voter turnout? Are there calls to change the electoral system to proportional representation?
I think it's part of the issue. I think it's there's the general feeling that not every vote counts the same. For some people, they feel like the vote doesn't count at all because of our system, and it's true. Like having a proportional system would certainly change the dynamic of our elections, and you could argue that you could motivate more people to be able to vote. We've had that debate in Quebec for a few years as well, just like it was talked about at the federal level for a few years. I think there's a general disengagement from youth because they don't see the change that they wish they could see. It's a frustration because we're probably the first generation where our condition of living are probably going to deteriorate compared to the ones before us. And so that general feeling certainly gives you kind of you disengage with the situation because of that. You'd rather not be thinking about it too much. We haven't seen bold policies from the government, just like young people would like to see. But at the same time, it's also there's also a misunderstanding of how many people are not there yet, are not aligned with the way youth sees where things should go. And I think that's why your work is so important as well, because we don't have the bold policies, because at the end of the day, the political parties, what they want to do is be reelected. And who they're going to talk to is the people who go out and vote. And young people are less likely to vote than older groups of voters. And so when political parties are trying to talk to a group of voter or put forward policies, they're not going to do it for youth. They're going to do it for other groups that I know are going to go out and vote. And that's part of the reality, is that if we had young people get involved and vote on a regular basis, you'd probably see the political discourse change a little bit. But it's a tough challenge because it's what comes first.
Chicken or the egg? We are right at the end of this time. Thank you so much. I'm sure we could all keep talking. I will plug that Vote 16 is there's summit in Ottawa on May 29th for young people going to a Senate vote. So if you are interested in talking about broadening this tent and electoral participation by lowering the voting age to 16, I would definitely encourage you to check out vote16.ca. New Majority will be there. We are actively involved in that campaign. It's definitely worth broadening that. I'm going to do, and I mean rapid fire because we are at the end. So two words. How do we increase more youth into electoral participation? Margaretta, kick us off.
Success is failure is the price of success. So fail a lot and you'll get better.
Love it. Nadine.
I will say, like, flip the table, like kick it down.
Knock that down. Clement.
I was going to say be bold and daring.
Love it. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful panel. Andrea.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for moderating, and to our wonderful panelists for helping us to learn about roles and opportunities to engage in elections and champion climate action beyond voting. We'll be back in 5 minutes for our second panel of the day, where we will hear from experts and practitioners about how to talk effectively about climate change and build connections across audiences. Thank you.